The lobby smelt like polished stone and something faintly citrus, and held a silence as if the whole building had been gently reminded to behave. Maria adjusted the strap of the tote bag on her shoulder and tried to breathe like a person who hadn't just spent the last 10 minutes rehearsing how to look calm. She'd done the interview, she'd signed the paperwork, she'd been issued a temporary pass with a polite smile and a welcome aboard that felt like a blessing. Now all she had to do was step into the elevator and become the version of herself she'd promised she would be: steady, capable, unafraid of bright places. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a mirrored wall that showed her face back to her with an honesty Maria did not ask for. Her hair was pinned up neatly, her blouse was pressed, her hands looked composed, until she noticed the way her fingers were curled too tightly around the tote strap. She let go. She stepped in. On the ride up, she watched the numbers change and let her mind do what it always did when it wasn't being supervised: drift toward unwanted memories. It had been nearly a year ago, on a night that had split itself neatly into before and after, a hospital corridor that smelt like disinfectant and tired coffee, a phone call she'd made from a public phone because she didn't trust her voice enough to talk to anyone she knew. The kind of night where you're not sure if you're asking for help or permission to stop holding everything together. Maria had called a crisis line, not because she wanted to die exactly, but because she couldn't see how to keep living without dissolving into something unrecognizable. Someone had answered, a woman's voice, low, calm, unhurried, as if time could be softened by the way you spoke. "What's your name?" the voice had asked. Maria hadn't said it. "That's okay," the voice had said, like she'd heard 1,000 unnamed people before and never once considered it rude. "You can borrow my steadiness for a little while." Borrow, as if steadiness was a cardigan you could offer someone shivering. Maria had told the voice small facts first. Her car was in the hospital lot. Her sister was inside, asleep after surgery. The lights were too bright. The chairs were too hard. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The voice had listened without interrupting, and when Maria apologized for taking up time, the voice had answered, gentle as a blanket being pulled up to someone's chin. "You're not taking, you're here. That's different." Later, at the end, after Maria's breathing had become something she could count instead of fight, the voice had said, "If you can, drink some water, eat something with salt, sit with your back against a wall so your body knows you're safe. And when you go back in there, it doesn't have to be brave. It just has to be you." Maria had never heard that voice again. She hadn't even known the woman's name. She'd only known that someone, somewhere, had held the line steady long enough for Maria to cross back over. A year later, on her first day at Halden and Row, with the elevator climbing toward the executive floor, Maria had not expected the past to be waiting in a tailored suit. The doors opened to a quiet reception area that felt like a library disguised as a business. Muted colors, soft lighting, the hush of carpet. A receptionist smiled at Maria with the kind of ease that suggested she never spilled coffee on important documents. "Maria Nguyen?" the receptionist asked. "Yes," Maria said, and tried to make it sound like she had always been a Maria Nguyen who belonged here. "Welcome. Miss Halden is finishing a call, but she asked that you be brought in as soon as you arrive. Would you like tea or water while you wait?" "Water," Maria almost said automatically, hearing the echo of that old advice. But she didn't want to feel haunted by her own memories on day one. "Tea would be lovely," she said instead. The receptionist gestured toward a sitting area and handed her a slim folder with her onboarding schedule. Maria sat carefully, as if the chair might judge her posture. On the wall opposite her, a framed photograph of the city's skyline made everything outside look like it was arranged for aesthetic purposes. Maria opened the folder. Orientation, IT setup, department introduction, a one-on-one with Ms. Halden, her new boss. The name looked clean on paper, neutral, safe. She sipped her tea and tried not to picture Ms. Halden as an intimidating silhouette behind a desk. She failed. The door to the inner office opened without ceremony. Ms. Halden stepped out. She was not tall, exactly, but she carried height in the way she moved. Early 40s, maybe, dark hair pulled into a low knot, a suit that fit like it was made for her body and her body alone. Her expression, when it crossed the room, was composed, polite, professional. Then her eyes met Maria's. Something shifted. Not dramatic, not a gasp, not a widened eyes, just a tiny pause, like the world had hiccuped. Miss Halden recovered quickly, stepping forward with a hand extended. Maria Nguyen, welcome to Halden and Rowe. Her handshake was warm, brief, controlled. She released Maria's hand and smiled, professional again. Please, she said, gesturing toward the office. Let's get you settled. Maria walked behind her, feeling as if she were following someone into a dream she'd never asked for. Inside, Miss Halden's office was spare in an elegant way. A desk with clean lines, a small arrangement of white flowers, bookshelves with more books than decoration, which surprised Maria, and a window that looked out over the city. Miss Halden moved around the desk, but did not sit immediately. She stood with her hands lightly resting on the back of her chair, studying Maria in a way that was not rude, but careful, as if she were making sure Maria was real. Have a seat, she said. Maria sat on the chair opposite the desk, placing her tote bag at her feet like an anchor. Miss Halden sat, then opened a folder. She glanced down at the papers, then back up. We're very happy you accepted the offer. Your portfolio is unusually thoughtful, not just technically good. It has intention. Maria swallowed. Thank you. Miss Halden nodded, as if she'd expected that answer. There was a space after it, a pause that might have been nothing at all if Maria hadn't been listening for ghosts. Finally, Miss Halden asked, How are you finding your first morning? Maria could have said fine, excited, nervous. She could have kept the world tidy. Instead, she heard herself say, softly, It feels like a very bright place. Miss Halden's expression softened in a way that made Maria's ribs ache. It is, Miss Halden agreed, but it doesn't have to be loud. Maria's throat tightened. That was the way the voice had spoken on the phone. It doesn't have to be brave. It just has to be you. The room went quiet, the hum of the building filling the space between them. Miss Halden cleared her throat and looked down at her folder again, as if paperwork could rescue her from the weight of recognition. Today will be mostly logistics, orientation, introductions. I'll have you shadow Lonnie in the afternoon. She's excellent and will answer all your questions before you can even think of them. Maria nodded. Miss Halden continued, voice steady. We keep an open door policy, within reason. If you need anything, you can email my assistant, or for urgent matters, come directly to me. Maria almost laughed at the understatement. Urgent matters, like seeing the person who once held your life with words now handing you a company-issued laptop. Her face stayed calm. Okay. Miss Halden's gaze held Maria's for a beat longer than necessary. Then she said very quietly, Maria, I'm glad you're here. Maria's breath caught. It could have been a boss's polite welcome, but Maria heard the difference between polite and true. She walked out of the office in a haze that felt like walking underwater. The day happened around her in neat little segments. She met Lonnie, who was, as promised, excellent, and who spoke in cheerful bullet points. She set up her computer. She learned the building's coffee preferences. She learned who liked meetings and who liked emails and who liked to pretend they liked meetings. And underneath it all, like an underground river, ran that voice. Maria tried to convince herself she was imagining things, that she was projecting, that it was impossible. But late that afternoon, when she was copying files into the shared drive, her phone buzzed with a calendar invite. Quick check-in, 4:45, Maria and Angela. Angela. So Ms. Halden had a first name after all, Angela Halden. Maria looked at the invite, her heart thudding. Angela. It fit the voice in a way that made Maria feel unsteady. At 4:45, Maria knocked on Angela's open office door. Angela looked up from her screen. Come in, Angela said. Maria stepped inside. Angela stood and moved toward the sitting area, away from the desk, as if she wanted the conversation to be less official. How was day one? She asked. Overwhelming, Maria admitted. That's normal, Angela nodded, as if overwhelmed was an acceptable offering. Maria held herself still. She didn't want to accuse Angela of being the voice. She didn't want to embarrass herself. She didn't want to be wrong. Angela studied Maria's face for a moment, then spoke with careful gentleness. Maria, I want to be very clear. If you ever feel uncomfortable here for any reason, you can come to me, professionally, confidentially, without consequences. Maria's hands curled. Angela continued, voice lower now. And if we've met before in any context, and you'd rather not revisit it, I will respect that. Maria's mouth went dry. She whispered, "The hospital." Angela closed her eyes briefly, a single breath, like she'd been holding it for 2 years. "Yes," Angela said. Maria's vision blurred. Angela opened her eyes again, and there was no corporate polish in them now, just a quiet honesty. "I volunteer," Angela said. "Have for a long time. It's important to me." Maria nodded, words stuck behind her teeth. Angela's hands were clasped in front of her, fingers interlaced tightly, betraying a restraint she'd mastered everywhere else. "You didn't give your name," Angela said, not accusing, just remembering. "But I remember your voice. I remember the way you kept apologizing for taking up space." Maria swallowed hard. "I do that." "I know," Angela said softly. "And you came back in the end. You went back into that room. You stayed." Maria blinked rapidly, willing herself not to cry in her boss's office on day 1. Angela's gaze softened. "Are you okay, having this connection exist between us now?" Maria let out a shaky breath. "I don't know." "That's fair," Angela said. "You don't have to decide today, or ever. If you prefer, we can pretend we've never met outside of this building. I'll follow your lead." Maria stared at her hands, the neatness of her nails, the faint indentations from gripping her sleeve. "It helped," Maria said finally, voice small. "What you said that night, it changed something." Angela's throat moved as she swallowed. "I'm glad," Angela said, and it sounded like relief. They stood in that quiet for a moment, the city beyond the window turning gold in the late afternoon light. Then Angela straightened, professional again, but gentler now, like she'd learned to carry softness without dropping it. "Day 1 is done," Angela said. "Go home, rest. We'll start properly tomorrow." Maria nodded, gathered her tote, and left. On the way out, she passed the receptionist, who smiled. "How was your first day?" Maria considered telling the truth. It was like finding the person who once saved you in the most ordinary place in the world. Instead, she said, "Bright." And then she stepped into the evening and let the sky cool her skin. Over the next weeks, Maria learned her job. She also learned Angela, accidentally, through the small seams where people show themselves. Angela drank tea, not coffee, and kept a jar of honey in her top desk drawer, as if she decided sweetness should be available in emergencies. She read real novels, not business books, and sometimes Maria caught glimpses of titles in Angela's bag: poetry, essays, old mysteries with creased spines. Angela's laugh was rare but beautiful, as if she didn't waste it on things that weren't worthy. They stayed careful. Maria did not linger in Angela's office. Angela did not invent reasons to call Maria in. Their communication was clean, professional, respectful. And yet, there were moments. A late night when the office was mostly empty and Maria was still working on a presentation. She looked up to find Angela passing by, coat on, keys in hand. Angela paused. "You're still here," Angela said. "I lost track of time," Maria admitted. Angela's gaze flicked to Maria's desk. "You've been staring at that slide for 10 minutes. Maria startled. "Have I?" "Yes," Angela said, and there was a softness in the corner of her mouth. "Drink water. Eat something with salt." Maria froze. Angela's eyes widened a fraction, like she hadn't meant to say it out loud. Then Angela added quickly, "There are pretzels in the kitchen, good ones, not the sad kind." Maria felt something in her chest loosen. A laugh escaped her, surprised and quiet. Angela's shoulders relaxed, as if laughter had given her permission to breathe. "I'll see you tomorrow," Angela said, and left. Maria sat there with the glow of the screen on her face, realizing she'd just been cared for in a way that felt familiar and impossibly new. Another time, Maria made a mistake, a small one, but in this company, small mistakes had sharp edges. She sent a file to the wrong thread. Nothing confidential, nothing disastrous, but enough to make her stomach drop. She went to Angela's office with the confession ready, rehearsed in her mouth like a punishment. Angela listened, then asked a few questions, then nodded. "It's fine," Angela said. "We correct it. We move on." Maria blinked, stunned by the lack of anger. Angela tilted her head. "Were you expecting me to scold you?" Maria's cheeks warmed. I was expecting consequences." Angela's expression softened. "Consequences are for patterns, not for being human." Maria swallowed, the words settling into her like warm tea. Later, when Maria left the office, she realized her hands weren't shaking, not even a little. The problem, Maria discovered, wasn't that she liked Angela. The problem was that she liked Angela in a way that felt like finding a quiet room in herself she hadn't known existed. It was dangerous in its own gentle way. Angela was her boss. Angela was someone with power. Maria had promised herself she would never again mistake gratitude for love, safety for romance. And yet, some evenings Maria would be walking to the train station and she'd hear Angela's voice in her head. "Borrow my steadiness. Drink water. Sit with your back against the wall. It doesn't have to be brave." And Maria would wonder what it would feel like to give that steadiness back, to offer Angela the same kind of care, to be the person on the other end of the line. One Friday, after a long week, the office emptied early. The city outside looked rinsed clean by rain, streetlights reflected in wet pavement like little coins. Maria was packing up when Lonnie leaned over her desk and asked, "Are you coming to the team drinks?" Maria hesitated. Crowds made her feel like she was being asked to hold too many voices. But she was trying, slowly, to become someone who said yes sometimes. "I might," Maria said. "You should," Lonnie said. "It's casual, and Angela actually shows up sometimes, which is like seeing a unicorn in a suit." Maria's stomach did a quiet somersault. At the bar, the lighting was warm and low, the kind of place that made everyone look a little softer. Maria ordered soda water with lime and tried not to feel like a child in an adult space. People talked, laughed, unbuttoned their work selves a little. Angela arrived 20 minutes in, wearing a dark coat and no suit jacket, her hair slightly loose from its knot. She looked less like a CEO and more like a woman who might have once sat on a hospital floor at midnight listening to strangers breathe. When Angela's eyes found Maria, there was a moment of recognition that was not about work. Angela came over holding a glass of red wine. "Are you enjoying yourself?" Angela asked. "I'm shrugging. I'm learning." Maria's mouth curved. "That's honest." They stood near the edge of the group, not isolated, but not tangled in conversation either. It felt like a small pocket of quiet inside the noise. Angela glanced at Maria's glass. "Good choice." "It's safer," Maria said before she could stop herself. Angela's gaze sharpened slightly, as if she heard the deeper meaning. "Safer how?" Maria looked at her hands. "If I drink, I say things I don't mean." Angela's voice softened. "And if you don't?" Maria's heart thudded. "I say nothing at all." Angela stared at her for a beat, then looked away, out toward the rain-streaked window. "I understand that," Angela said quietly. Maria turned to look at her. Angela's expression was composed, but something in her eyes looked tired in a way that no boardroom could create. Does it get lonely? Maria asked, the question slipping out like a secret. Angela's hand tightened around her glass. Yes, she admitted. Sometimes. The word hung between them, honest and unadorned. Maria's chest ached with the urge to reach out, to offer something, anything, but she kept her hands at her sides. Angela took a small sip of wine. I should go soon. I have an early call. Maria nodded, oddly disappointed. Angela hesitated, then said, very carefully, Maria, I want to check something with you. Maria's pulse quickened. Angela continued, her voice low enough that it couldn't be overheard. I am aware of what it might look like if I favored you or spent time with you or spoke to you differently than others. Maria's breath caught. I don't want to harm you, even accidentally. Maria swallowed. You haven't. Angela shook her head slightly. Not yet, but feelings have a way of walking into rooms before we invite them. Maria felt her cheeks warm. She couldn't tell if she wanted to run or stay. Angela's gaze held hers, steady and kind. If you ever feel uncomfortable or pressured or confused, I want you to tell me. Maria's voice came out as a whisper. What if I'm not uncomfortable? Angela's expression flickered. Something raw moved beneath her calm. Then Angela exhaled slowly, like someone stepping back from a ledge. Then, softly, Maria, we still have to be careful. Maria nodded, the word careful feeling like both protection and heartbreak. Angela set her glass down on a nearby table. I'm going, she said. Good night, Maria. Good night, Maria answered. Angela walked away, and Maria watched her disappear into the crowd, feeling as if she'd just been handed something fragile and told not to drop it. That night, Maria lay in bed staring at the ceiling, rain tapping at the window like a patient question. She thought about the hospital corridor, about the voice that had held her steady, about Angela saying it gets lonely, sometimes, in a bar full of laughter. Maria thought about what she wanted, not in a fantasy way, in a real way. She wanted to know Angela's favorite book. She wanted to bring her tea without it being strange. She wanted to rest her head against Angela's shoulder someday and have it mean something quiet and certain. But she didn't want to become a story where the power imbalance poisoned the tenderness. She didn't want to look back later and wonder if she'd been guided instead of chosen. In the morning, Maria made a decision that felt like swallowing a stone. She requested a meeting with HR. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a complaint. It was simply Maria saying, I need to understand the ethical boundaries here, and I need a plan. HR was kind, practical. They laid out policies like roadmaps. They asked questions, gently, about whether anything had happened. Maria answered honestly. Nothing had. Not really. Not in ways that mattered legally. But the feelings were present, unspoken but breathing. HR suggested options. A transfer to a different department under a different manager, a temporary reporting structure, a formal disclosure if anything progressed. Maria left the meeting with a packet of information and a knot in her stomach. That afternoon, she knocked on Angela's office door again. Come in, Angela called. Maria stepped inside, holding herself upright with sheer will. Angela looked up, immediately noticing the tension. What is it? Maria sat down, hands clasped in her lap. I spoke to HR, Maria said. Angela went still. Maria hurried on, words trembling but determined. Not because anything has happened, it hasn't, but because I don't want this to become something harmful for either of us. Angela's face softened with something that looked like pain and respect tangled together. Maria continued, voice steadier now. They offered a transfer, different reporting line, same work, similar role. It would take a few weeks, but it's possible. Angela's jaw tightened. She looked out the window, then back at Maria. You're doing the right thing, Angela said quietly. Maria blinked rapidly. it doesn't feel right. It feels like leaving something before it even begins. Angela's gaze held hers, steady as a hand on Maria's back. Sometimes, Angela said, doing the right thing feels like grief. Maria's breath hitched. Angela leaned forward slightly, elbows on her knees, no desk between them now. I need to say something, and I need to say it carefully. Maria nodded, heart hammering. Angela spoke slowly, as if choosing each word like a stepping stone across water. I have felt something since day one, not because you were a new hire, not because you're young or brilliant or any of the things that would make this feel suspect. I felt it because you were you, because you came back into my life like a quiet echo, and I recognized you too. Maria's throat tightened. Angela. Angela lifted a hand, not to stop Maria, but to keep the moment contained. But, Angela continued, I will not act on it while I'm your boss. I won't blur that line. I won't risk your safety, your career, your autonomy. And I need you to know that, clearly. Maria's eyes stung. Angela's voice softened further. If you transfer, and time passes, and you still feel something, and you want to see if this is real, then we can talk, as equals. Maria swallowed hard. And if I transfer and then realize it was just gratitude? Angela's mouth curved in something tender and sad. Then I will be glad you protected yourself. Maria let out a shaky laugh that turned into a breath. You're very good at making hard things sound survivable. Angela's eyes warmed. It's a skill. Maria stood slowly, as if standing might stop her from falling apart. I'll take the transfer, Maria said. Angela nodded once. Okay. They held each other's gaze, the room full of unsaid things. As Maria reached the door, Angela spoke again, voice quiet. Maria. Maria turned. Angela's expression was gentle, careful, true. I'm proud of you, Angela said. Maria's chest ached. Don't, she whispered. That makes it harder. Angela's eyes softened. I know. Maria left, heart bruised but oddly steady, as if the ache itself was proof she was alive in a new way. The weeks that followed were strange. Maria's transfer paperwork moved through the system like a slow river. People treated it as normal, which was a blessing. Maria worked hard, kept her head down, let the distance grow like a necessary boundary. Angela became, in public, exactly what she had always been, professional, composed, kind. But sometimes, in passing, their eyes met, and Maria felt the quiet tether still there, not pulling, just existing. On Maria's last day under Angela's reporting line, Angela called her into the office one final time. Not for a dramatic goodbye, for closure. Maria sat across from Angela's desk, the familiar chair now holding a different version of her than the one who'd sat there on day one. Angela slid a folder across the desk. This is a recommendation letter, for your file, and for you, in case you ever need it. Maria's throat tightened. Thank you. Angela's hands rested on the desk, still, controlled. I also, she said, and paused, have something else. Maria's breath caught. Angela reached into a drawer and pulled out a small card, plain and unmarked. She placed it on the desk, closer to her than to Maria. My personal number, Angela said. You do not have to use it, and you should not use it until you're officially transferred. But after, if you want, you can text. Maria stared at the card as if it were a spark in dry grass. Angela's voice was very quiet. Only if you choose it. Only if it feels free. Maria nodded, throat too tight for words, and carefully slid the card into her notebook. Angela stood, and Maria stood as well, the space between them suddenly charged with everything they weren't touching. Angela offered her hand, businesslike. Maria took it. The handshake lasted a second too long. Then, Angela released her and said simply, Good luck, Maria. See you around, Maria managed. Angela's eyes held hers. I hope so. Maria walked out of that office with the strange feeling of having done something both brave and gentle. 2 months passed. Maria settled into her new team, new manager, new rhythm. Her work remained close enough to Angela's orbit that she occasionally attended the same meetings, but the dynamic had changed. Angela was no longer her boss. The air between them felt less dangerous, more like possibility. Maria tried not to think about the card in her notebook. She failed, nightly. On a Tuesday evening, after a day that had been quietly exhausting, Maria made tea and sat at her small kitchen table. Rain ticked against the window, soft and steady, like a familiar hand tapping a comforting rhythm. Her phone sat upright beside her mug. Maria stared at it. She imagined texting Angela and making everything awkward. She imagined Angela replying out of obligation. She imagined regret. And then she imagined something else. Angela smiling at her phone alone in her apartment, loneliness easing slightly not because anyone owed her company, but because Maria chose it. Maria picked up her phone before she could overthink herself back into silence. She found the card, typed the number, and wrote, "Hi, it's Maria. I waited until the transfer was official, like you said. It's raining tonight, and I thought of you. Would you like to get tea sometime? No work talk, just tea." Maria stared at the message, thumb hovering. She hit send. Her heart pounded like it had just run upstairs. She set the phone down and took a sip of tea she couldn't taste. Minutes passed. The rain continued, patient and unbothered. Then her phone buzzed. Angela. "Hi, Maria. Yes, I'd like that very much. Tea this Friday? There's a quiet place near the river. And thank you for choosing that." Maria's chest filled with warmth so suddenly it felt like sunlight through clouds. She typed back, "Friday sounds perfect. And you're welcome." Then, after a pause, she added, "Also, I'm still learning how to take up space, but I'd like to practice, with you." A reply came quickly. "Angela. Then I'll make room." Maria set the phone down and leaned back in her chair, eyes closed. Outside, the rain softened, not stopping, just changing its mind about how loudly it needed to fall. And for the first time in a long time, Maria let herself imagine a future that wasn't about surviving, a future about being met, a future that began simply with tea.